So I kind of wanted to give a little framework for this session. I've been working over the past 8 months or so here at MAFCA in a large collaborative survey of farmers, buyers, and consumers in the state of Maine, addressing COVID-19 pandemic impacts on the Maine food system. This study has been finished and our final report is about to be publicly launched sometime in the next month. But I kind of wanted to share today a little snippet of what I found to be one of the most exciting results, a key finding from the farmer survey in particular, which again was kind of for me the impetus of launching this session for the Farmer to Farmer this fall. So of the farmer survey, which was conducted this past March and April, we had 50 farms here in Maine throughout both District 1 and District 2 spread out evenly, I think out of 14 of the 16 Maine counties, a variety of product mixes from vegetables and produce and fruit to livestock to dairy and some other crops too. So it was a pretty broad swath of Maine farms that responded to our survey. And so the really exciting findings for me was one of the gross sales to other farms. You can see what was reported in 2019 was a little over 20,000. That more than doubled in 2020 because of COVID. And we asked farmers to give their sales by sales channel. So we saw a lot of sales channels like restaurants, farmers markets, sales to institutions drop. And this one in particular, sales to other farms, more than doubled. That was really exciting to see. And the expectation, again, this survey was done in March and April, so the expectation was to continue those sales at a similar level for 2021. And then kind of reflecting that from the other perspective, we also asked on our farmer survey of those of you who have farm stands that you buy in product, how do your purchases compare? And here again, we saw a huge increase from the 2019, way back when things were normal, quote unquote. We had from our 50 surveyors, only a certain percentage of them were actually buying in. And so those who said they bought in were buying in, 383,000. And that jumped up to 540,000. Basically, on average, about $12,000 worth of product bought in per farm stand over that pandemic impact. And again, same kind of expectation for 2021 to retain that increased level.
Okay, so I'm Kate Del Vecchio from Tender Souls Farm. My husband, Richard Lee, and I run the farm. We're in Richmond, Maine. So you can see my little map here in that of Maine, and that green star is Richmond. And so we bought this farm in 2015, and it had been a working farm before we bought it, and they had a farm stand on the property. That picture there of the red farm stand is the farm stand that was here. We just gave it a new coat of paint and added some signs and filled it up with our stuff that first year in 2015. So besides our farm stand, we also do a CSA, farmers markets, wholesale, and we sell seedlings. And the farm stand has continued to be around a third to a quarter of our income for the farm. And we have it open daily, so every day from the day we open in May through December. And we close it in December because it is not insulated and it gets very cold. Everything starts to freeze, and our sales drop off. So they're starting to drop off now in November, and then we open it back up in April or May when we start having our produce coming in from our high tunnel and our seedlings are getting ready. So it is unstaffed. it's been unstaffed since we opened it. Our 2-year plan is to insulate the farm stand and to staff it, and then have it go year round. And it's 8 feet by 10 feet. So this is another view. I just ran outside today and took this picture, but so it's a little busy, but the farm stand is the red building on the middle right. And here's the inside of the farm stand. The panorama photo makes it look a little bit wider than it is, but you can see we have a 3-door cooler in there, and just a plastic table on the right that we fill with produce, and then the shelf on the left that kind of curves around in an L, and that's it. And then we have this little mini fridge we added this year for soda. And so getting to our product mix, the things in green on this list are the things we grow or produce, and then the rest are all things we buy in. So we do a large mix of organic produce. We don't grow everything. We do cut flowers as well. And our own kimchi is coming online. It's going to be in the farm stand next week, which we're very excited about. And then the rest of these things we buy in. So on any given week throughout the year, I am buying in from 8 to 10 farms, putting in orders. And then there's about 20 local producers we work with, or it's even more than that actually, but that includes 2 producer cooperatives that we buy in from. So starting last year, we started buying in from the Daybreak Growers Alliance, and this year we also started buying in from Community Harvest, which is a community of farms based in the Unity and Amish communities. And part of what helps us decide on our product mix is what our customers want. We do surveys. We keep even though the farm stand's not staffed, we do have a notebook in there, and sign up for our email paper. So we get people that give us their emails, and we send out bi-weekly emails or every other week. And so one of the things we try and do every year is a survey, asking people what they like about the stand, what they want to see change, and any products they'd like to see added. And so some of our strategies for buying in is, one thing my husband and I have noticed is that we're both pretty conservative and risk adverse. We've grown really slowly. But you know what? I think I need to go back up because I missed, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I missed this slide. So this slide is showing our farm stand income percentage of growth from the previous year. So we started in 2015. So in 2016, our sales were up 15% from the year before, 2015. So you can see our farm stand sales were growing around 20% until 2020. And so I have 2 asterisks here because obviously one thing that happened in 2020 was the pandemic hit, and demand for local food went way up. And so as many people saw, many farms saw, the demand for their product skyrocketed. But the other thing that had happened that year so my husband and I, through MAFGA's Maine Farm Resiliency Program, we had money that we spent with FarmSmart, Jed Beach, who's a farm consultant. So the whole fall, winter of 2019 going to 2020, we'd done a ton of work with FarmSmart to figure out where our farm was financially, where we wanted to go, and how we were going to get there. And so part of that was doing crop enterprise budgets for every single crop we grew on our farm, to see whether it was making us money or not. And also looking at our enterprises, such as our farm stand, our farmers markets, our CSA, and just pulling them all together into the big picture, and figuring out how we were going to grow each of those things or downsize them to get where we wanted to be financially. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to pivot really quickly because we'd done all this work over the winter and knew we wanted to grow our farm stand, and knew there were certain products that we didn't want to grow anymore because they weren't making us any money. And so we were quickly able to just start pulling those in from other farmers where they were available. So our statistics matched what Nicholas showed really nicely, almost like exactly, for growth for us. And so down in the bottom here, I have in 2020, we also doubled the amount of product we had bought in for our farm stand from 2019. And for this year to date, we've bought in roughly about the same amount as we had last year. So continuing on. So for our pricing strategy, in general, we do about a 30% markup on the goods we buy in. And greens, we usually mark up a bit more just because they're so highly perishable. If you lose a few bags, that could mean you're not making any money or you're losing money on them at that point. Corn, pumpkins, and berries are things I often don't mark up quite as much. Some of those things, there just seems to be more customer price sensitivity. And other things are just removing so much of them that I know we're making money on them, and so I don't have to mark them up as much. And then also one of the things we figured out with that consulting we did was that the farm stand has to carry a percentage of the fixed cost of the farm. So we need to know that the farm stand is making enough money to make it worth it to do it. Otherwise, we're just, like anything else, it's just we've got 2 young kids and we're getting older and tired, and we just need to be able to see that those things we're doing are making money and they're efficient. That being said, we do put a lot of energy into food access for people at our farm stand and farmers markets. So we are part of the Maine Senior Farm Share program, and we deliver shares to the senior housing in town. We accept DBT. We're part of the Maine Harvest Bucks program that MOFGA's made really accessible for us. And we accept WIC checks, and we do donations to local food pantries and schools. And I know some of those things can be really hard to navigate. And so if people have questions about those things, I'm happy to answer them later, or through email. You can email me. So thank you very much. Here's our website and our email, and we're on Facebook and Instagram.
So we're a little bit different. So we're in Maine. We're in Vermont on the southwest corner. So yeah, we're just over the border from New York, about less than an hour from Albany, and we're on a main road, but off the road a little bit. And I'll go into that just briefly. Thank you so much for inviting me. I just want to give you a brief outline. didn't add any sort of general farm slides. I'm mostly just focused on the farm stand, and I was going to, and I thought, I don't want to bother people, but I'll just give you just a brief history about what we do. So we started in 1994, or 95 was our first season. We're growing about 30 acres of veggies organically, and we have a bedding plant business, and also, we do a lot of greenhouse organic veggies also. So we've probably got, I think, like 24,000 square feet or so in ground growing, and another 15 to 20,000 that we use for bedding plants. And some of that in-ground growing is bedding plants, and then it becomes in-ground growing space also. We sell a lot of bedding plants in the spring, so we're open from May until Columbus Day, as far as our farm stand and our retail outlet for stuff. So, but in May it's just bedding plants, and we don't start selling produce till June, because our bedding plant business is just too crazy. It's super busy, and yeah, it would just be too much for me, and my head would pop off. So we have about, in the middle of the season, about 30 employees. I'd say 10 of those are farm stand people, and we generally have 4 people running, 3 to 4 people in the stand at one time throughout the day, but we run some shifts because it's a long day to start at 7:30 setting up, and you're out of there. We used to close at 6, and it was torture. So we close at 5:30. Everybody can be out of there at 6, but it's just a lot for people to do that full day now. So, so we have shifts throughout the day, and I have a stand manager or 2, kind of, they share it, and they're amazing. One of them has been working for me for, I think, about 8 years in that position or so. And I mean, I have some employees who've been working for me for 20 years, and a bunch in the mid-teens, and I've got a lot of good employee retention, which is the only way I could do it. If I didn't have retention or had new employees, I'd go down to growing just perennials and blueberries, and I'd get out of the farm stand business. But in any case, so let me see if I can move the slides around here. Nope. Let me see how I do that. Sorry, I didn't check on that. Maybe, how do you, oh, there it is. Okay. So next slide. So like I said, we're on a main road with about 3,500, 4,000 cars go by a day, and we're on the corner, but our farm stand's in about 100 feet down this side road. So we do have, we try and keep it nice out front with a nice sign. And, it took us, this is our 27th year. We started with a table under a maple tree as we renovated an old barn that took us a year to renovate, my friend and I, and Cobb carpenters. We it took us a little bit, but we made a nice old barn into a pretty nice farm stand. But it's taken a long time to get to the level that we are now, where we have like 200 to, the main part of the season we'll have 200, 300 individual, like, unique groups of customers a day coming to our farm stand. But initially, we were happy to have 50, and we did a lot of farmers markets and other things. Now we do our farm stand. We have a winter CSA, which I'll briefly talk about, maybe if I have time. We do like a senior farm share thing through Vermont organic farmers. We do a sort of CSA at the hospital for heart patients kind of thing. And we don't do any more farmers markets. It was just wiping us out to try and do that on a Saturday. Fridays were just crazy. So we try to drop that, and it's been the best thing. And like everybody, COVID was really good for us, not so good for the world, but our sales went up. In our 26th year, we went up 30%, which was that was a huge amount. And it was great. I have some money left over at the end of the year, and I work hard on keeping my employees going as much as I can throughout the year. So a lot of them, like a core people. So that was really helpful to give some bonuses too. And they worked really hard under the COVID stress and everything. So really was so grateful to everybody. So our farm stands up this, we like to have a nice entry. And so I'm going to mix like fall shots and summer, and mostly we'll have pre-COVID early slides, and then we'll have some COVID slides and, that kind of thing. Just bear with me. Mostly I'm just giving you some shots to look at, but I'll just talk about stuff in general that don't necessarily pertain to the slide. Kate, that was awesome. All the data and statistics. We don't have it. I don't have any of that for you. I'm sorry about that, but anyways, the entry is really important to us. So we always try and keep it looking nice. This year was a little tough. There was so much. We had 35 inches of rain since Memorial Day. So it's been really wet and sloggy, and it's been a tough year this year. But people come up, and this is pre-COVID. So there's no, it's just open. People can come in and go any direction they want. And we try to, have a nice look, have some Maine things out front, like melons and our corn. Those are pretty crucial items. And so we keep those out on the front porch in the summer. This is this year's corn, but, corn is a major draw. And there's not a lot of farmers around us anymore. Farmers are sort of slowly going out. There's some CSAs, but like the big farm stand that grew a lot of corn, had 100 acres of corn, and they're about 15 miles away in New York. They unfortunately had to sort of scale down for health reasons, and they're great farmers. But so it's been, we have corn every day once we get it, and we try and have just our own, but sometimes I have to buy in corn. But last year I did it the whole year from mid-July to mid-October. This year I had to buy in corn like 3 days. But here's a winter squash. So this is a different season. Once again, we try and have full, a lot of selection, full big display baskets that people can pull from. We have a lot of signage. Signage is really crucial. We designate, so those signs all have our little logo and it says our own organic. And then the stuff we buy in says either organic or just says conventional. We try as much as possible to show where things are from. But, we try and have there's some better shots later, but, so I'll briefly go into what we buy in, or maybe I'll talk more than briefly about it, but we buy in a lot of supplemental vegetables and fruits. So we try and have our stand really be like a one-stop farm market for people. So they come here and people can just they get everything they need other than, charcoal, and people get beer. We don't sell that, but we sell a lot of produce and fruit. I go down to a farmer's sort of a regional market in Albany every Friday at like 3 a.m. and buy stuff. And I have good relationships with people down there now after 25 plus years. And so I know what's good. We have, like there's, I think those, the local apricots you see on the bottom, like those things, we don't sell a ton of them, but it's that kind of stuff, and figs and the plums, that things. And, number one, I would say if you can get Pennsylvania or New York State peaches or Georgia peaches when early in June, and then Carolina peaches, like peaches we sell 30 cases to 40 cases a week of peaches. And it's probably, we bring them in, and our markup on peaches is 125%. So if we buy them for $1, we're selling them for $2.25. And most of our markups, just so you know, and I think it's, I don't know how you would phrase it, but we add 75% to most things because it's a lot of effort to do this. And people come here and it's an experience, and we don't mark up. Like you go to a farmer's market and people are charging $6 a pound for their tomatoes. We don't do that. Like when you have a farm stand, my feeling is people, especially like ours, they treat it like a grocery store. So they're really price conscious. So I really try and be very careful. But I also realize, for my work, for my effort, and my farm stand, my employee, I have like 4 employees all the time, just marketing farm stand stuff. I got to mark up enough for that to make some money. And, you look around, food's expensive. You go to the grocery store and you think, people will be like, oh, your blueberries are so expensive. Well, it's the 1 week they're for 99 cents a pint at the grocery store. Otherwise, they're $4.50. And so, yeah, ours are $4.50, but they're also local, and or they're our own. When we have our own at $5.95. That is one thing we charge a lot on is our berries, but strawberries and blueberries, because they're so, as everyone knows, labor intensive. But yeah, just to show you some more photos, we try and have really full displays. Um, and like I said, peaches and nectarines are really crucial. I'm going to try and move ahead to some other photos. So this is a COVID shot because Kristen's wearing a mask there. But we also buy in bread. We buy in lots of local meat that we freeze. So we get some beef. We get sometimes we have goat. Sometimes we have lamb, chicken, pork that's local. Some not so local, but locally produced sausages and stuff. And let me just see what else, just so I don't miss things. Oh, we have lots of local dairy as well, like yogurt, cheeses, local milk that's organic as well. And the other place, we also buy a lot of supplemental staples from United Food or UNFI. And we also buy in organic, like grapes and bananas and avocados or whatever from Albert's, which is affiliated with UNFI. And also there was Black River Produce Supply. So when I go to the Albany market once a week, I supplement between there with these other people. But Black River, which was local and was pretty like a full statewide wholesale produce and other producer, got bought out now twice by larger conglomerates. And the quality and the service is just totally tanked. And their prices have gone through the roof. And so Albert's is a lot cheaper. And the minimum is like $750 an order, which we can, we are able to move that kind of volume. But sometimes I'll go together with somebody else, and if I need to make a minimum, and we can collaborate with someone else if I need to. Once again, so our displays, it's all about color and texture. And my wife does cut flowers. She's not really part of the farm other than that. She's an artist and has her own career, but she also does a lot of artwork that hangs on the farm walls. So I really count on my employees for like all the support that we need. We also like to grow oddball stuff like artichokes. Is there money in it? If I did a crop budget on it, probably not. But it's having the diversity for us at our scale is really, I think it adds a little something to our farm stand. It makes it for, people love to come by, and it's kind of an experience thing. Sorry, there's a little video. I'll just show it. It's a lot of people's feet and a lot of legs, because it's the only video I had, but this was pre-pandemic. But you just got to sort of sense a little bit for our farm stand. We've changed things a little bit since this, but we have local sour cherries that just went by on the video. But we bought in, this is the season we're buying in the watermelons and Pennsylvania peaches. They're not, those aren't New York State yet. And, but we try and have like a real full display. In our coolers, we have some open coolers, you'll see. And, there's some of the fruit we buy in, and then there's, and some of it's not organic for sure. But we try and really offer most everything we can. That's, a lot of greens that are ours, and the roots and all that usual farm fare. I love beet greens, even though we don't sell them. So there's another money loser, but I love having them. And there's like 3 old timers who come in once a week and buy like this huge armload of beet greens and take them home. So to just briefly talk about coolers, we just upped we bought 2 new freezers, and I bought a 3-door refrigerator. Oh, we buy lots of baked goods in too from like 3 different bakeries. Sorry, before I forget, get away from that. And but I think they're called Milagros, and we get them from Bush Refrigeration, like a 3-door display cooler, brand new, on wheels, which is really nice. It was like $4,500 delivered, I think, this summer. I mean, not to say anything, but the headaches you save from buying that's like, if you can get to that point. I mean, we'll drop $4 grand for a mulch layer, right? Well, let's buy $4 grand for something that's going to say, really produce and market our stuff. I mean, we should be putting that. The way I look at it is I've stopped investing a little bit, or it's really slowed down investing in equipment. I have a lot of farm equipment, but I, like, oh, it was a no-brainer to spend $4,500 and upgrade from this cooler, like Kate was saying, like the doors don't seal, and it was just a leaky mess. And I really am happy that we did that. And we bought two. You can see the freezers in the back. Those are our two freezers that you're looking at straight ahead. They're on wheels. They might have been like, that was last year. I can't remember. I went from a 2-door freezer to two new 2-door freezers, and we filled them up. And luckily we did it for COVID, and it actually was just the right timing because we just sold so much stuff out of those freezers. So now that it was COVID, and this year we did this too, we have people going in one direction. And so they come in the farm stand, you kind of see, they kind of go to the right, and then they go around, and they get to go, they see everything. In a way, it's better now because people go through and they have to walk by everything to get to the register. And we love, there's a local orchard over in the other, well, 40 minutes away, an hour away, but we get delivered. They do all sorts of heirloom apples, and yeah, it's great. And we always try and have a large selection of those. But now you can see we had the plexiglass screen in front of my employees there. This was last year. And you kind of get a sense. It was sort of, I think this one was early in the season, so it's not super full yet, but it's getting there. And that's kind of how our farm stand looks. We do local honeys, and we buy in chips, and we get granola and oils and all that stuff. You can see some of the artwork my wife has put up on the walls. And oh, one other thing, just looking at my notes, that super friendly stand help. If you're going to have stand help, they better be smiles, because if they don't smile, don't bother. Find someone else, because you get those customers, like, people want to come into a place and feel welcome. And my standees they're just super nice. I stay out of there because I'm often stressed and kind of in a hurry. And maybe people sometimes want to see me, but I try and hide because I'm not as good at it as my help. And I'm so grateful that I have such amazing people running my stand, and they really care about what's going on. And I think that might be my last slide. I'm sorry, but we love to see a customer go out, happy. Like this woman, Timmy, every Friday she comes in and buys 2 bouquets of flowers, and she's just happy as a clam to come in. And we upped the price this year, like $2. My wife was really worried, and Timmy's like, oh, I don't care. It's like, oh, she didn't care. Nobody cares. Yeah. So let me see what else. Any other notes I have? The key items I would say for your farm stand are berries, peaches, greens, sweet corn. I mean, for our farm stand, I should say, corn, and tomatoes. We do a bunch of greenhouse tomatoes. We don't sell as many as we used to because so many people. I mean, there's not a lot of farms around us, but a lot of people are doing greenhouse tomatoes. When we started 25 years ago, we could sell a lot. I mean, we still sell a lot, but it's just not quite the same, just because they're so available.
I'm going to kind of talk a bit about the nuts and bolts of the pricing strategy. And Andrew provided some good segue, and Kate did as well, talking about their margins. So what I'll do is I'll give some overview of industry standards, and then how you use industry standard formulas, how it impacts your own farm, and then looking at ultimately how to set your pricing mix. So I'll pull up my little screen, and I'll do share screen. Okay. People off to the side so I can see the slides. So this is our farm stand pricing strategy. One of the key things, as I mentioned, is how does your pricing interact with the industry, and then how does it impact your business? So we want to basically understand how other people are setting their pricing and how retailers set their pricing. But then just doing what your competition is doing won't necessarily help your farm succeed. So we want to understand how pricing is set in general. And then we actually need to evaluate, as Kate was saying, how it impacts our own business. And you might need to modify your formulas based on what you need individually. So the next thing we need to do is look at what the industry standards are. I've been researching farm and food pricing since the early 2000s, and food and beverage has consistently been on average about a 35% gross margin. I'll explain what gross margins are in a minute. Personal care runs about a 50-50, and nutritional supplements, sort of vitamins type things, run about a 60% margin. So we're going to kind of stick into that food and beverage section, but if you have body care products, lotions and things, you can look at personal care. And also if you're doing some nutritional supplement things, understand that those margins are slightly different. The reason that the industry typically goes by margin as opposed to markup. So when Andrew was talking about markup, he's using his base price and then he's marking it up. Retailers typically look at the item as the cost of goods sold, and then they want to base their pricing on what they need for overhead and profit, and that's called their margin. And so rather than looking at a markup, they're looking at, if I need a 35% margin cash flow, then that cost of goods sold cannot be more than 65% of the price that I'm going to sell it for. And so for folks who are doing a markup, that's fine. We just need to understand the difference between a markup and a margin and how they interplay, because if you're using the two terms and you don't know what the other person is referring to, like if Andrew just said, I'm using 75%, and he didn't tell you it was a markup, that would be an astronomical margin. And when you actually look at what's 75% as a margin, 75% comes to a 43% margin. So it's actually not so bad. He's higher than average, but it's relatively within reason. So the first thing to understand is margin versus markup. And then within the margins, what are the industry standards? So for food and bev, it's 35%, personal care, 50%, nutritional supplements, 60%. So how do you go about setting pricing? And it was great that Andrew used the heirloom tomato example, and he also said $6 because it's actually the example that I had prepped. So if you look at how to set your price, if you are buying in heirloom tomatoes from somebody and that person was charging you $3.90 a pint, then in order to get a 35% gross margin, you would do the price that you purchased it in at, the cost of goods sold, times the one less the 65%, because you're trying to get that 35% margin. And so that would come to a price to consumer of $6 a pint. Then you have to balance that with your own personal need. 35% might not actually work for you. You might need, as Andrew provided the perfect example, you might need a 43% margin. Kate, in her case, is able to work with a 30% margin. So we need to understand what your farm needs, but in general, trying to see how you fit within the industry, and especially if you're facing a lot of competition, knowing what the averages are is helpful, but then understanding what you need is what's most critical to ensuring your success. So what is it costing you to run the stand? If you know what it's costing you to run your farm stand, then that cost, that's considered your overhead expense. So if your overhead expense needs to be at 35%, then what do your sales need to be in order for you to achieve, knowing that the cost of items being produced by you should make up no more than 65% of the cost you're selling them for, and the items that you're buying in should be no more than 65% of the price you're selling them for. What do your sales need to be to generate a 35% margin? So that's where you get into this thought where Andrew was talking about how many transactions do you have per year? What is the average dollar value of each transaction? And if you divide the number of transactions you're doing by the amount you need, is this realistic? Sorry, my kitty cat's getting very excited that we've got Zoom going. And that's when you might say, well, how many days or weeks are we open? And so at the end of the day, how many people you need walking through the door to hit the margin that you need? So when we look at what are those sort of overhead expenses, there's very specific expenses related to the farm stand. And this would be an exercise you would do with any sales channel you're going through. One of the misnomers about farmers markets being fairly cost effective is because most of us are not exactly paying the labor of going to the farmers market. So once we actually factor in the cost of standing there for the amount of hours that we might be spending, farmers markets might not necessarily be a very cost effective tool if we're factoring in our own labor. Same thing with the farm stand. So if we're going to staff that farm stand, what's that going to cost? What's it going to cost us to build the farm stand based on the cost to actually build the infrastructure or buy the fridge, buy the freezer units, based on the life in years, what's the annual expense of the infrastructure that you need to include to your operating budget? What's the cost of your utilities? What's the cost of marketing the stand? All of those things go into your overhead, that 35%. Once we know what that 35% is, then again, we'll factor back out to what does the farm stand need to be generating to cover that at a 35% margin. And that would get us to break even. The next step is profit. So we don't want to necessarily just be breaking even unless you ensure that all of your quality of life goals and all of your owner's draw and all of your reinvestment and retirement budgets are factored into your overhead, which most likely they aren't. Most likely, if we're unless we're on payroll, we're going to be operating on an owner's draw type of structure. And so that comes below the line as profit. So we need to remember, what do we want as profit in addition to the overhead expenses? Once we add in that profit, and Kate mentioned, for example, the farm stand needs to be covering 1% of the overall farm's overhead. So that needs to be factored in. Once you factor in the overhead of the farm stand, plus the desired profit to support overall farm overhead, owner's draw, retirement, kids' college education fund, 401ks, that's when you say, okay, that's what I need to get to that 35% margin. So you could then identify, what does the farm stand need to be generating to operate at a 35% margin based on the number of average dollars per transaction you have and the average transactions per year. Does that look realistic? What might need to change? If nothing, that's great. We celebrate, we go forward. If we need to change, then where can we modify things? And so this just breaks down that process again. So what's your average dollars sales per transaction? And that means, like, when somebody's coming into your farm stand, on average, what's the price that they're walking away from if they buy one lettuce, one loaf of bread, one dairy item? What's the average sales ticket that's walking off the farm? And you want to understand that by the average ticket. You also want to try to track things like, when is the stand busy? Because if you need to do modifications, so where are the hours of the day that we're busy, or days of the week that we're busy, or where we could be maximizing opportunities. But ultimately, you want to know the days that we're open. And if we looked at the total sales divided by the average dollar value per transaction, that would tell us how many transactions we need per year. And if we looked at the days or weeks that were open divided by the total transactions, that would tell us how many transactions we need per day. And as Andrew pointed out, initially when he started, he was doing about 50 transactions a day. He's now up to 200 to 300 transactions per day. Each of your farms is going to be different. And that's where farm stands can be a bit tricky, because depending on how visible you are to the public, accessible you are to the public, it might be great to hear that somebody else is getting 200 transactions a day, but is that feasible for your farm and your location? So really understanding what are the strengths and weaknesses of your farm, and then how can you maximize that to get to the number of transactions you need. So this is where we go into that kind of feasibility testing. What are the value variables that could change? Could you change the dollar amount per transaction so that you have, and this is where that idea of product mix comes in. So whether we're bringing additional things in for sale, or we're looking at our product mix that we're growing, what could encourage people to spend more while they're there? Could we change the gross margin? Could we reduce the expenses or the profit needed to try to reduce the overall sales needed? Those are just some ideas for, in general, if you're not successful from the start in saying, oh, okay, I need to make this much money, and based on the transactions that we're getting, we're going to hit that. Increasing gross margin, and when is it appropriate? So this is where we talked about the industry standard is about 35% for food and bev, but sometimes that might not be a possibility for you. If you need 43% margin on average, then you might have to charge that. The key, if you're going to charge a higher than average margin, is that you'll definitely need a special unique selling proposition, like what Andrew was saying. You have to be a draw, because if you're charging above average, then people need a reason above and beyond pricing to come to you. In Andrew's case, one of the things that he was mentioning was step number one, the part on distributor margins, because a lot of the product he's pricing and putting a markup on is stuff that he's grown himself. He's omitting the need for going through a distributor. And because of that, there's margin built in between what his product would price out at in a retail setting versus even once he's applying his 43% margin, 75% markup, his tomatoes are still coming in at below $6 a pint because there was a 25 to 30% distributor margin built in there. That's the benefit that farm stands have. Most retailers are buying in the majority of their product through distributors. And when you're buying in product from the distributors, that product has had the farm's 35% margin applied to it. And then it's had the distributors 25 to 30% margin applied to it. And then it's had the retailers 35% margin applied to it. So if you don't have to go through all of those links on the chain to get that product in your farm stand, then there's margin that could be either passed on to the consumer, so the price comes down, or you can build in a higher margin, and in certain cases you might need that. So that's helpful. The second bullet is that idea about loss leaders. So you can have a mix of margins, and you can play with your margins and have some high, some low, as long as price sensitivity, your customers will bear it, and as long as you have a reason for it. So for example, with Andrew's artichokes, his artichokes at a 43% margin are not making him any money, but he's got a higher margin on the peaches. He's applying at 125% markup. He's applying a 55% margin to his peaches, and the peach margin is what's enabling him to offer artichokes, which he's not making money on growing them, but the artichokes bring people into the stand, and that supports the two of them balancing each other out so that the whole farm stand operates. So you can play with the margins. You don't have to follow what the industry is doing, but you have to have a reason and a rationale for why you're playing with your margins. And you also need to know that if you are going to be above industry average, that you really definitely need to have a unique selling proposition, which could be the farm experience. It could be the beauty of your setting. Whatever you identify as your unique selling proposition, you just have to make sure to capitalize on that. And so then just to give some examples, just the numbers in a bit of a visual format. So the price waterfall calculator, if the product was going through that distributor if the farm was producing the tomatoes and selling them direct to a another farmer, the farmer could be selling them either at their distributor price or at their wholesale to retailer price, direct to retail versus wholesale. So the farm could potentially be buying in the tomatoes at $281 to $390. So that's where you get that wiggle room of being able to do some price margin and pricing, playing with your margins and pricing. Ultimately, if the farm that you were buying from was charging you a price in which they're maintaining the distributor margin, they would be selling you those tomatoes at $390, and you then would be applying a 35% margin. The tomatoes would be on sale in your stand for $6. If they were selling them as if you were a distributor, if they were just offering you the wholesale price, which a lot of folks don't distinguish. A lot of folks just say, this is my wholesale price, whether they're selling to, for example, Daybreak Growers Alliance, or whether they're selling directly to Tender Souls. And in that case, you as the farm stand could, if you're buying the product in for the $281, could be selling them for a 35% margin on $281, or could be assuming that distributor component and still selling them at the retail price that another store would be selling them for at $6. So the margin versus markup calculator. I've added this in because I know people it's hard to understand the difference or conceptualize it. So I just wanted to use the same industry standard numbers. So for example, if you're seeking a gross profit of 35% and you hear somebody talking about a markup, that means that the markup is about 55%. If you're hearing that somebody's markup is 150%, like when Andrew was talking about the peaches and he marks them up 125%, that means at 150%, the margin is 60. In his case, the margin is going to be about 55. So again, they're just two different ways of talking about the same thing. They shake out to the same number on the other end, which is what I'm going to show you. So the variable, you bought in the tomatoes for $3.90. If you were using a gross margin of 35, they come out at $6. If you were using a markup of 55%, then they would come out to $6. And it's just a difference in terminology. And when someone is telling you a percent, you just need to make sure that you're understanding what frame of reference they're referring to. This is one thing that I wanted to highlight. It came up at the end of Andrew's talk, and I don't know the rules and regs for Maine on this, but in Vermont, it's actually really important that you pay attention to this. The state has a legal limit on how much purchased in product you can resell. If you have a farm stand, only 49% of total revenue can be from purchased in product. So you do have to be very careful, and it sounds like Andrew's right at that threshold. And I'm not sure if Maine has those same limitations. You guys will know better than I, and that's just something to pay attention to. That was all the slides I had for today.